Everyone. This is Representative Carolyn Partridge, and this is a meeting of the House Agriculture and Forestry Committee. We have a number of witnesses today, and we have been dealing, as you know, primarily with COVID-19 related agricultural issues. And we've heard in recent weeks from a number of folks regarding farmers markets and food supply chain and what have you, and dairy farming, which is so important. We know our farmers are really suffering from low milk prices and or projected low milk prices. And we've found sort of creative ways to avoid the dumping of milk. But we have another group of dairy farmers today. Last week, we heard from Jane Clifford. We have some folks here, and we're going to be asking them to talk about their experience. I'm going to ask people to please mute themselves unless they're actually speaking, and just to cut down on the background noise. And our first witness is Amanda St. Pierre. Amanda, I see you here, but you're a black box. So I don't know if you want to go live on video or if you just want to speak. However you want to do it's fine. There you are. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I want to just thank everyone today and your committee, especially for having us testify. It's always good. Wish we were in person. And I think the last time we visited your committee, I had some younger folks with me, which I would have loved to have done again. And hopefully that can happen next time. Everyone's out on the fields today. The sun is shining, but it is very cold. So we had snow 2 days ago. And I think, you know, on top of everything else, that was pretty much the limit. Corn planters stopped and there was snow on the corn planters. So, but I'm going to just start by, again, you know, stating I'm Amanda St. Pierre. I farm in Berkshire with my family. My two sons will be joining officially as partners in January. We're very excited about that. Our family's expanding. My two daughter-in-laws help out on the farm, and my daughter is working as a social worker and pursuing her master's, but she also is helping on the farm and doing our maple online business, as well as doing some of the events that we do. And so it's a very rewarding time. And we said this in our family meeting yesterday, that we're all healthy. It's been very trying. We're going to be going into some really trying months due to the COVID-19 situation, but we're sitting around the table and we're all here. All five of us are here. My father-in-law did his self-quarantine and he's happily back on his tractor. And, you know, we're blessed in that way. And I think most farmers would say the same, that we keep trying to go back to the positive. What I'm going to testify today, and I want to make sure that the other members of Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance and the industry are able to have adequate time. So I'm going to be somewhat brief and to the point, but I'm open to any questions that anybody has at the end. But I wanted to talk really today about what we're all dealing with, and what that is, you know, COVID-19, the pandemic, and how it affected our industry. You know, we've revamped our industry quite a bit in the last 4 years and struggled through some really tough times, but we were amping up for a really good year. And we had made a lot of changes on our dairies the last couple of years. We cut our cost of production, looked at every segment that we could, became more efficient, invested in efficiencies. We invested in water quality projects as we were geared up to do. Felt really good, you know, going in to this new 2020, that we had done a lot of things right. So we were ready to capture better markets. And then COVID hit. And through no prediction of anybody in the world, not just our state, not just the farmers, not just our country, and it really has taken a devastating toll on our markets, and really related directly to the change in the demand and what type of products are being demanded during this time. You know, with schools closing, then it was restaurants closing, and then the world markets and then it was the processing plants not being able to process the milk because people were sick. I'm so sorry. Hold on. She took it. I meant to turn my phone off. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay, Amanda. Life goes on, even though we're on YouTube.
Right. So these things were really like out of our control and not anything that we could prepare for. I don't think that any business, any industry could have prepared enough reserves and had such a solid, planning and balance sheet that they could have gotten through what we're going through without any additional supports and not having it really change the trajectory of at least 2020. So that's really what our farmers in Vermont are dealing with. And I'm here to talk about dairy, but ag of all sectors, dairies of all sizes, and dairy in general. But it affects the vendors that support our industry. And you're going to hear from Josh Poulin today, and you're going to hear from Dave Lane from Yankee Farm Credit to also shine light on those two aspects. So here we sit now, planting season's here, the most expensive time of the year for most dairy farms. And our price of milk has literally gone about an $8 a hundredweight drop is what they're predicting. We've got through last month, and now this month is where the checks are really, really, really going to be affected, where people are not only going to get a zero check, they might get a negative check because they have milk assignments that usually come out. And that is a really scary time because vendors have to be paid. We have to pay for our seed. Our vendors have been great to work with, but they're at their limits. They're facing the same things we're facing. And so this is a time where we really need some additional funding through the CARES program, CARES Act, and, to help us with COVID related issues. I think there's been a lot of debate and a lot of discussion on, what our industry was like coming into this. And that is not really the point of the discussion. I think really what we're seeing is directly related to COVID. There's no mistaking it. We put together a little bit of a report and we looked at our milk price headed into this pre-COVID, and we were forecasted about $19.50 a hundredweight. And when COVID hit, prices are predicted to be now under $12 a hundredweight. And that's nothing else related to COVID. That's not because of world markets. It's not because of trade that normally happens. It happens because COVID hit our world. And what we're asking for is some funds to help us with that. And when we get those funds, what our industry does that I think is unique to other industries is that money stays in Vermont and it gets recirculated 7 to 8 times. I'm not sure there's many other industries that have that kind of stake in the Vermont economy. And I guess that is why it's so important to stress that piece. What are farmers doing right now? Farmers are looking at their inputs as much as possible. They are also facing reduction in their supply of milk. Both co-ops, Agrimart, DFA, and formerly St. Albans Co-op have implemented controls, supply controls, to limit the amount that goes out on the market. So the only source of income that these farms had is now also being reduced at the farm. And so I guess, it's a scary time, and farmers that have the next generation, that have an exit plan, that have somebody coming to purchase their farms, those are the farms that I'm really concerned about, because they are ready to continue and provide such a valuable service to Vermonters. We just did a milk giveaway Friday, and I have to tell you how humbling it was to see folks drive through the line and talk about how they were so happy we did this, how much they support dairy farms. They recognize the importance Vermont farmers have on this state. But equally, there were a number of people who were like, we haven't been able to buy milk in several weeks. And it's really an economic thing. It's really an economic thing. There was one mother who hadn't been able to buy milk for her kids for about 3 weeks, and she was in tears. And it was such a humbling experience. And it was also enlightening because here we are limiting our supply in stores, which I think we've taken care of finally. But A, people couldn't find our product, and B, then they couldn't afford it. But yet farmers are still not being compensated for that milk. So, I mean, there are definitely things we can work on after COVID, but right now our main focus has to be on the issue at hand. And I guess that is really why we're here in front of your committee, is to talk about that and to come up with maybe some ideas of funding. I will tell you that we did work, Vermont Dairy Producers Alliance did put together a packet. We would love to share with your committee. It's a working draft, but we'll clean it up. That does talk about mid to long-term goals down the road, and very open to that. But we need to get through this crisis of COVID-19. And I'm going to end there and just open it up to questions and allow the other members to testify.
Thanks, Amanda. I'll tell you, if you don't mind, I would ask for my committee members to hold off on the questions until everyone's had a chance to testify. We have the entire 2 hours to spend with you, and I don't anticipate it's going to be a problem to get everybody through, but I think it would be good to get through presentations and then be able to ask questions, if that's okay with you.
That's great. Thank you for your time. Yep.
Yeah, sure. Okay, next on the agenda, I have Darlene Reynolds. And Darlene, you're here, and would you please introduce yourself? Thanks so much.
Hi, can you hear me? Good. My name is Darlene Reynolds, and my husband and my 4 daughters own Crosswinds Dairy and Daughters in Alburgh, Vermont. I have been speaking in front of your guys' committees since 2006, and very happy to be back here again, but also very saddened to be back here in a time when COVID has definitely affected our industry. We have been a very progressive farmer on water quality. I've also have been chair of the Farmers Watershed Alliance for several years. I've actually stepped down in the last couple of years to really concentrate on efficiencies on our dairy farm, and to concentrate on making sure that we make it through these times to hopefully bring on 2 out of my 4 daughters onto the dairy. I have one daughter who actually is graduating with no ceremonies from UVM with a degree in animal science with a minor in entrepreneurship. I also have another daughter who graduated from the 2+2 program 4 years ago, and very proud to have both of them still on the farm today and still looking for positive ways to be in this industry and be in this state at the same time. COVID, I gotta say, has really taken quite a bit of time and energy out of our group to sit down and talk about how to manage this. Because when it first started discussing it, the first thing we started thinking about is how can we do cutbacks? And then it's one thing to drop a $2, $3 a hundredweight, but there's another thing to take $8 almost out of your budget, and to figure out ways to make that efficiency be happening, you know, especially on our dairy, and almost daunting. It was like a step stage, you know, trying to figure out how we were going to survive through this month. You know, first step certainly was the grain company, cutting back on grain. We had to cut back on production, so that was the easiest measurement. Cutting back on labor, cutting back on efficiencies as far as like products we can purchase, you know, so on and so forth. And I got to say that not only have them meetings been difficult for my family to have, but at the same time, they've been very enlightening to understand that we're all still in this and committed to being dairy farmers, and willing to work through that. I am glad on many of the points that Amanda had brought up earlier, but the one thing I want to say is if the state chooses to help a dairy farmer through COVID-19, the one thing I got to stress is that those dollars will go back locally to the tire people who helped us put tires on our tractors, to the auto industry who helped out putting filters through oil changes, you know, through making sure that we have grain, making sure that Bomatic is there to help service our milking equipment, and harvest equipment, Champlain Valley equipment. There, Bordeaux Brothers. There is many, many, many vendors in this state who would be grateful to make sure that farmers can continue to be in this industry, because you know we're a huge part of it. I mean, I was just in paying our auto dealership in Swanton the other day, and he was just so excited that I brought a check into him, and I said, well, I still owe you money. And he said, no. He says, but you guys bring in significant dollars to us. It's one thing to sell somebody $100 part. There's another thing when you come in and pay your monthly bill and give us, you know, $1,500 because you've ordered filters and everything else for the springtime. So there is a difference, and farmers really can generate them dollars for those people to stay in business. I also want to assure you that, you know, there's such thing as cause and effect. I mean, the one thing for our farm that we're struggling with is that we were gearing up, like Amanda said, we were gearing up to produce milk. I calved in almost 100 cows in March. So that meant having to turn the spigot back down again considerably, because in March I was calving them in, so I really wasn't producing that milk. By April, I was actually making much more milk than I was in March, and my quota is actually from March's milk. So it seems like I'm a double-edged sword, because my 15% actually turned into 25% that I have to cut back, which was kind of another thing with conversations with my kids, and how to figure that out at the same time. And we're working through that as we go. And I just wanted to let you know that as things change and progress, please understand, and I hope that the state of Vermont has a commitment to knowing that milk is a great product. That even in last night's news, they were talking about COVID being actually really bad for people who had deficiency in vitamin D. So one thing that milk has is vitamin D. And I thought that was a great thought process, that, you know, we should be pushing that. People should be adding dairy products to their diets, because it's been proven that people with deficient vitamin D actually have worse, you know, contact with COVID-D, and actually life-threatening than it is. And of course, the study that just came out last year, that kids under 5 should be drinking milk. They should be drinking milk at all times. They've actually put a study out stating that plant-based products should not be in their diets, that they should be providing those nutritionless vitamins and fats that need to be in young people. And I think we should really push those ideas. So, and that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Darlene, thank you so much. We really appreciate you spending time with us today. Next on my agenda here is Steve Cahart. And I see you there, Steve. Thanks for joining us today. And if you could introduce yourself, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Steve Cahart. I have a dairy in Addison, along with my brother. We're a second generation farm partnership. We have around 1,200 cows. And COVID has definitely affected us just like everyone else. We started way back in 2015, a reinvestment in our dairy. We had 2 milking facilities where we were milking all of our cows, with parlors that were over 40 years old, fully depreciated. And we started a reinvestment plan that was going to have us building a new dairy facility, with the goal of getting everything together and kind of getting us set for, you know, the next generation. I'm in my early 50s. I have 3 children that are all either out of college or in college. At the moment, none of them are on the farm. And my brother has got 2 children, one that's out of college and one's in college as well. So part of what we did was to give our kids the opportunity, at least to help build a place for them, that they've got an opportunity to come back, much as my parents did for Tim and I back in the early 90s. I will not soon forget being out at a meeting in Syracuse, New York in February, when I heard of the first COVID case that was in the United States, and had one of those feelings in of my gut of, this is not good. And we all know that since then, life has been a little bit of blur. You know, not really knowing what the short term is, and really for me, a little bit more of not knowing what the long term is. You know, prior to kind of what unfolded, our plans for this year, we were really, we had gone through the first phase of our reinvestment, our expansion, and things were really starting to click pretty good. And our second phase of that was to construct another dairy barn that would allow us to shut down one of my parlors, and then we have been done. And really, that's definitely on hold for the short term. And really, I don't know about the long term. You know, I know we started doing some budgets. I've been a big budget builder for years and years. And we started doing budgets back when the news of this first kind of hit. And the effects on my business, when I look at what our milk price was last year versus what our agri-market economists were predicting this year, it's a loss of over $1 million in revenue. And I don't think I'm going to surprise anyone to tell you that we don't have $1 million of excess in our budgets to deal with. We held meetings here at the farm with our different crews of people, our people that work with the cows and our people that work in the crop and machinery end, and really talked about, you know, what things can we do? What things can we streamline? And the reality of it is we already run a pretty tight operation, as most of the dairies in the state do. There's not a lot of fluff that's in there. But we did what we could. You know, that loss in revenue doesn't even take into effect now what we're dealing with the decrease in production controls. You know, that's kind of on top of that. We've been, you know, I've participated in the PPP program. We've got some other things that have kind of will help us out as best as we can. Our lender has offered to defer some payments, which I think is fantastic. And we'll be taking advantage of that. But really, you know, going forward, we're looking at it in kind of two lights. One is, what do I got to do to get through to January 1st of 2021? That's the short term. And I'm very confident that I can do that. The second step of that is, what are we going to do to make sure that we're here 10 years from now and still offer the opportunity for our children to be a part of this business? That's the one that has me more concerned. I feel fairly confident that there's going to be a lot of things different in the industry, both on the local, the national, and an international level, that we don't even grasp at this point. Much of our national product supply, if you will, is really grown to rely on the export markets. And what are the export markets going to look like next year? What are they going to look like 5 years from now? And I have great concern over that. We have a nation have already kind of struggled with an oversupply problem, and you know what's going to happen on the international side of that, and will there be a market for our product in Mexico, in China, and other countries? You know, that's kind of the view from Addison, the view from our dairy. We definitely are, you know, doing the best that we can to kind of run a tight ship here, and feel like any of the assistance that we've gotten from either the federal government or hopefully through the state, through the CARES Act, is money that's sorely needed to kind of keep the wheels turning. I just finished our budget for the month of May, and my income in May is down around $115,000. My expenses are up about $75,000 for the month of April because of spring planting cost. And that's the reality of the situation. You know, you can get really depressed in a hurry if you allow yourself to. I like to think that we've had a fantastic spring in terms of the field work. We're further ahead than we've been in a long time at this point, and that feels really, really good. But I thank you for the opportunity to testify and would welcome any questions at the end.
Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. It's been interesting too for me to be home here in Wyndham during the last month and a half, 2 months. Usually I'm in Montpelier most of the week, but there's been a certain delight actually to watch spring come and get ready for the lambs. So I appreciate that. You know, it kind of cheers you up when you get to experience that. Our next witness is Bill Rao. Bill, we really appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you so much. If you could introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, good morning. Pleasure to be here. See you all. Bill Rao, Chair of Vermont Dairy Producer Alliance. My brother and I operate Green Mountain Dairy in Sheldon, Franklin County. We milk around 900 cows. We produce just short of 27 million pounds of milk annually. That usually goes pretty good. We usually get a quality award for our milk, always have. And we were looking at a pretty good year this year. We had a bright prospect on the horizon and everybody was feeling fairly chipper, I guess you'd say. But that didn't last too long. Right today, they say we're about $7 a hundredweight short of where we were when this started. And for us, that's short in our milk check each month, or for this month anyway, $170,000 short. And somehow we have to figure out how to do what we do without the cows knowing it, without the employees knowing it, without the vendors knowing it, and hopefully without the state knowing it. But at this point, we come before you to ask for some help. A few weeks ago, I had an idea that, and I was talking with some people like Bob Gray. He's the lobbyist in DC for the Northeast Dairy Cooperatives. And I spoke with Peter Welch, and I spoke with Mike McCloskey out in Indiana. And what's the problem that we have? Our markets aren't moving. How do we stimulate the markets to move? If you look at our export partners, for example, we have probably at least 4 major export partners. Would be like Japan, China, Mexico, and South Korea is another big partner. If you look at the currency that Mexico uses compared to our dollar is strong right now. Their currency is a small fraction of our dollar. They have to feed their people. They're our biggest export partner. How do we do something to stimulate that? How do we do something to help them feed their people? We don't want to see hungry people when we're dumping milk. So the idea is this: why is it we can't use government money? The government's written some awfully big checks lately, and some of the money hasn't gone to where it was intended, we hear. And how does it go to where it was intended? How about if, to make those markets move, let's say if someone buys $10 million worth of a product from us, and we need X amount of dollars, and they look at their currency and they say, gee, maybe we can only afford 3/4 of that because we don't have that kind of funding available. Can we do something through a government voucher with that exporter to help them feed their people, send that product as part of a feeding program to that country, and make our markets move so that the farmers have some money to pay their vendors, so that our infrastructure can stay intact, so that we have even enough money to assemble the General Assembly. I mean, we're in a real spot here. And I understand that dairy has had its issues in the past with trying to do something about the supply-demand balance. The co-ops have now decided to address that. About time, in my opinion. Not convenient on the one hand, but on the other hand, I remember in 2010, we stood in a shadow of an inventory for the whole year of 2010, because 2009, nothing moved. It was all warehoused. We don't want that to happen again. That keeps us down too long. So I sent that idea to Peter Welch, Patrick and Bernie also, and asked them if they had any ideas. And we'll see if they have any ideas. Must be they can do something. They're in Congress. We're working for the federal government under our federal milk marketing orders. We don't get as farmers to do as we please. So when we get in trouble and can't do otherwise, we turn to the government. And I will say this, it's difficult to work for a government that is restrictive with their federal orders, and a government that has a cheap food policy at somebody else's expense. It's a little bit difficult to plan your plan and go along about your business with a smile on your face. So here we are before you. And yesterday we were before the Senate Ag Committee, and it sounds like you folks are going to come up with a little money for us to help us through so that we can pay the vendors so that we can all stay here. Vermont is a small rural state, and right now it looks pretty good, doesn't it? We can get more than 6 feet away from people. Can you imagine if you were in a city where you couldn't get 6 feet away from people? Can you imagine if you were in a city with 3 or 4 kids on the 8th floor of a building? That would be hard going. Up here, we've got it good. And those people look at us like this is luxury. And I think you're going to see a lot of them show up after this. They want to get out of the city and come to Vermont. And we don't want to see our fields fill up with houses. Hopefully we can retain what remaining farms we have, and we can be less divisive with some of our issues, get along and be Vermonters and be productive. And, you know, most of us are quite proud of what we do and where we are and who we work with, which includes you folks. So thank you. That's my testimony. I'll turn it over to someone else.
Thanks, Bill. Really appreciate your time today. And I think that's a really interesting idea. And maybe when we go to the question period, you can say a little bit more about the response from Peter Welch, if you know, if this is something that has been done in the past. So,
Yeah.
But let's move to Meg Nelson. Meg, I think you're there. If you'd like to turn it, you don't have to, but if you'd like to turn on your video, that would be super. There you are. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yes. Yes, thank you for having me. It's nice to be back. So to start off, my name is Meg Nelson, and I am part of 2 different farming situations now. My husband and I moved back to the Northeast Kingdom last spring, and he works with his family, Nelson Farms, and I am working with my family at Chattagay Farm in Craftsbury, Vermont. Uniquely, one is a large farm and one is a small farm. So I'm coming at you from two different points that in light of all of the COVID, everybody is feeling the same financial stress. It doesn't come in different, I guess what I'm trying to say is that everybody is feeling this across the dairy board. It doesn't matter, large, small, medium, everybody is really affected by this. So on our farm, my dad and my mom do all the work, and I help them milk and do a lot of book work and things like that. In order to stay safe, some of the things that they did right away was halt all hired help on the farm. They had some relief milkers, and now they've been milking 185 cows by themselves, doing all of the chores, the feedings, all of the heifers, scraping the barns and such all spring. And I've been doing some of it with them, but mostly really trying to do keep our own family safe and social distance the best we can. We had to cut back on allowing people onto the farm, like salesmen, suppliers, nutritionists, all of that we've started doing via phone call and Zoom. But in order to meet the DFA 50% drop, we've had to beef some animals and dry off cows early to try to get down below. And we're really gonna see a hit on that. That's a lot of money that we're losing because of that 50%. And then, you know, just in April, between two milk checks, we saw $5 per hundredweight less on the second milk check, and we'll see what May shapes up to be. You know, we're hearing $8 less. That's really scary for any size farm, because I think going into this, we had all of 5 definite bad years, and all of the funding and financial outlets have been exhausted going into this. So nobody was prepared to have to struggle through COVID and milk decreases and milk check decline. It's just was not expected from anybody, and that's all industries. I mean, we're seeing this with restaurants and how big that was for the dairy industry when restaurants and schools stopped and having to dump milk and such. So that's kind of, I really wanted to just emphasize that it's hurting everybody, and we're not any better off because we're big or any better off because we're small right now. It's really impacting all farms. And one thing I just did want to touch on briefly, and then I'll let the questions or somebody else speak. I've heard the term relationship farming come up a lot, and this COVID-19 has put the kibosh to a lot of relationship things that farmers get out in the community to do, whether that be on the school board or whether that be a salesperson stopping in. And that has taken a different sort of toll, I've noticed, on specifically my parents, just not being able to socialize with people because the financial piece of it is weighing so hard, not being able to enjoy the other outlets in life, like having bonfires with their friends or visiting with the milkman and such like that, have just taken a different sort of mental toll that I think has really brought more so of a depression down on our farmers. So yeah, that's what I wanted to get across, and I hope that Vermont can find some sort of package or relief for our farms to get through this hump and get back to 2021 and start looking up like we were before all this COVID happened. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Meg. And you remind me, and we'll have the information. If you know of farmers that are really struggling in any number of ways, there's a program called Farm First, and they should definitely reach out to Farm First. We'll have that phone number before the end of our live video. So thank you. for reminding me of that. And thanks for your testimony today. So our next witness is Dave Lane. Dave, I see you up there. And thank you for taking some time to spend with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am a senior VP with Yankee Farm Credit. So Yankee is an agricultural lending cooperative. So our members, our borrowers are our members. Members are elected to our board of directors, and for Vermont, we're the largest agricultural lender. We cover all of Vermont. We also cover 4 counties in New Hampshire and 2 in New York. But about 80% of our lending is in Vermont. We originate close or over $800 million in lending. We hold about $550 million. And so about just under 50% of that lending is in dairy. The rest is in maple, timber, vegetables, all sorts of diversified agriculture. So I've heard the testimony, and I agree with all of it. You know, after 4 years of dairy putting up with and managing low margins, sometimes negative margins, we saw a lot of improvement in 2019, and 2020 was looking to be a very good year as far as milk prices and the projections for the dairy economy. This crisis, this dip, the COVID-19, has greatly affected prices, as you heard, from between $7 and $8 a hundredweight. Yankee has been able to provide some cash flow relief. What we're really looking at is a very, very deep trough in the milk prices, with them coming back up by fall. So any way that we and all the partners, the federal government, state government, can provide a bridge over that deep cash flow trough, I think is good money spent. The industry overall has done a lot of work with the management on the farms. There's many of these farms, as you've heard, that have management teams that are put in place. They've dealt with the low prices. They've positioned themselves with investments in the right place to improve their profitability, to improve their margins. They know how to cut costs, and they know how to manage. So from a management perspective, we have really good managers, really good business people running these operations. But none of them knew or could really plan what we're experiencing right now with the COVID situation. You know, Yankee, I think it was mentioned early on, we offer financing, but we also have business services. We have tax records, payroll. We have an appraisal department. We also have a consulting department. We run a large dairy benchmarking program along with Farm Credit East in conjunction with them and Ag Choice Farm Credit. So we have a lot of data. We have been offering free budgeting services, which a number of farms have taken us up on. And we've been doing that for a couple of years. And what, again, that has all been part of the dairy industry becoming much better managers, much more professional in how they look at their businesses. So dairy as a whole, I think, has continued to become stronger because of the dedication, the courage, and the management that we have on the farms. But dairy farms have require a lot of fixed assets that are expensive, and so they've made very large investments. They have, along with those fixed assets, they have a large amount of fixed cost. So when you have such a rapid decline in prices, it's really hard to cut because most of those costs are already fixed. Yankee Farm Credit has been able to help. We became an SBA lender for the Paycheck Protection Program so far, and this is our whole association, but it's about 80% in Vermont. You know, we've made 140 of those loans, which at some point SBA needs to figure out how the forgiveness works on those loans going forward. But we've also done over 200 loan actions with deferrals and increases in lines of credit to help during this time. Again, Vermont's a dairy state. It's a strong dairy state. The industry is just going through really a surprisingly hard time given where they were if you looked at projections back in even February, where the milk prices was projected to be. So I can take questions with everyone else. But
Great, Dave. Thanks so much. All right, our last witness is Josh Poulin from Poulin Grain. And Josh, thank you for joining us. Thank you to Dave for spending the time with us. But Josh, thank you.
Well, they say the best for last. I think they got that one wrong on this one. But anyway, I am Josh Poulin. I own a dairy farm in Derby, Vermont, and I also own Poulin Grain. So we're a fourth generation family feed company here that's been in operation since 1932. So been around dairy. My grandfather farmed, my uncle farmed, obviously a lot of, friends and things. So I guess I got a little different spin. I don't know how much people know or here on the committee know kind of what was going on in dairy before COVID. I just guess I'd like to explain that. They were making changes inside these co-ops to try to fix maybe, or at least help out some of these oversupply issues that were going on that kept this in a pretty tough time for 4 years before this. I think we've been down there. I think you guys know we testified in your committee and others about some of these things that have gone on. And, this is a countrywide thing. So things have changed a lot if you really look at it. Both from, you just heard Dave Lane talk, supplier wise, both customer wise, a lot of things in the last, I guess I've been kind of running here, Poulin Grain for the last 15 years. A lot of things have changed. The markets have changed, the dairies have changed. And the reason I'm talking about this, I think from a dairy standpoint, there's only been a couple ways to actually be able to forward your business because they don't necessarily control the end product, what it gets sold for. You have, when you spend money, you've had to grow or gain efficiencies. And a lot of that has been through growth. So given the situations we've been in with obviously some of our demand and some of our products here in the East being, it's been a little tricky, right? Fluid milk consumption's been down over the last, whatever, we'll call it 30 years. But it's really taken a pretty big dive ever since the beginning of the 2000s, I'd say it's really been on a pretty rapid decline. And so given that now kind of with what we've seen in COVID, we just barely started coming into a situation which I think was going to make things at least seem better. and it was going to make things better as far as, pricing, both for customers and suppliers and the whole industry, right? Things were going to get back to somewhat what we would call a price level where people can not just cut costs, but actually operate their business the way they're supposed to. Dave Lane just talked about, we're capital heavy businesses. That's true for most of ag, whether you run a feed company, whether you're running a dairy farm, whatever it may be, anything that's associated with fertilizer businesses, we're all capital heavy. We have a lot of assets that need to run to be able to produce what we do. And when things aren't good, you stretch those assets further than you maybe should in a lot of ways. So that's going to be the bigger. So that's a little brief, I guess, my take on what's going on before. And now we get COVID and we take. So I did a little math and I did it in percentages, maybe just so that, like at my dairy, I'm up 360 jerseys from January to May, and I did some estimating on May's milk, but it's a 43% loss in income, right, to the farm. So that's a pretty, I don't know who else we could try doing that, take your salary, cut it by 43%, figure that out. It's just, it doesn't work, right? Everything you had, even given the factors I just said before, that doesn't matter. At this point, we're going to live through at least, I'm going to guess 3 months of things that are, honestly, I don't even know what they call that. They used to say it's not ever as good as it seems or as bad as it seems. This one might be as bad as it seems. It's really going to hit home. So a couple other stats I had written down just from the business standpoint and what's going on, just to know what we've done from an industry standpoint over the last few years. We're about 3 times higher in our accounts receivable than where we were back in like 14 and 15. So we've tried to support dairy through the last 4 or 5 years, given the hard times they've been through. In that time, in 14 and 15, feed was about $40 a ton higher than it is today. So that if I do the math back on that, it's actually almost 4 times higher. We have a lot of, it's really, so that's really been a challenge for ag businesses and farmers, obviously, the relationships and how you deal with those things as you work through this stuff. The other thing is what we've had to do when people don't make it. We were living in that $100,000 to $200,000 a year mark where we were basically calling those losses and writing those off at end of years. 18 and 19 almost touched $1 million, at least for our business here at Pool and Grain. So I think, I really think that the industry's figuring some stuff out, and maybe there'll be some silver lining from this COVID thing as far as like how we come out of this on the supply side and demand and how we manage things going forward. But for the next 6 to 12 months, I think we're definitely going to need some help from the state, the federal government, figuring out how we get ourselves repositioned as these markets change. My dad lives in Florida. I talked to him yesterday. They've opened some restaurants down there. He went out to eat, I guess. I don't know if that was a smart move or not a smart move, but he did. And he says there's nobody there, right? There's some people, but there's really nobody there. So when, having people serve you with a mask and rubber gloves on is going to be a little, I just don't think people are going to run back out to have that, So our supply chains and how we've got to manage this from the co-op side and from the farm side is drastically changed. And that's it's just not a fast fix. And I think a lot of farms did start making investments over the last year or so to try to get ready for things that were going to be a little bit more normal, because they have ran things a little further. You heard Steve talk earlier, they had a power that they'd run a long time in facilities. And, at some point, you have to reinvest, and you hope you do that at the right time. And, we've done the same thing with the feed business. We've held back, not bought as many trucks, not done this, not done that, to try to help, control costs. But there's only so much when you run an asset heavy businesses like agriculture, at least dairy agriculture, and most of agriculture is. So I do think not being able to either grow or be able to figure out ways to generate more income for a lot of these farms over the next few months is going to be a huge challenge. I mean, I think like all of the people that have testified before me have stayed awake a lot at night and talked and called and you know, it's definitely changed the feed business a lot. We don't send our salespeople are going to farms if they have to sample feeds and do different things, but not really having everything else is done the same way we're doing things today, over the computer or over the phone. The other thing I'll just mention is there's been a lot of talk about essential, and I think that I think that word has gotten overpopulated, but I really feel that what we do, not only just dairy, but all of these things that we do are very essential. And I hope that people in government and people in places that are looking at this realize that even the stuff we're on computers, they may be essential today, but really when it comes to essential in life, that we, I think we're proud of what we do from an industry standpoint, and we really feel that it's essential and are happy to do that. We just hope that we can survive to the next chapter, because I do think this is definitely going to be pretty rough. You know, if you look at what farm numbers have done in the state of Vermont over the last, you know, I think in the late 80s, there was over 8,000 farms here. And now there's, I think they had a thing in Hordes Dairyman there a couple months ago. There's 680 farms, and the average herd size is 190 cows. So, you know, there is definitely consolidation, but I think this could be really fast consolidation if we don't have some sort of help and opportunity to try to make sure that all these people can survive through this. So with that, I don't have a lot other than that. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Josh. Really appreciate you spending some time with us. I wanted to I think you're aware of the fact that the Senate has been working on a bill, a dairy assistance bill, that would be more of an immediate one-time payment to our dairy farmers. I think there's general support. Our committee talked about this last week very briefly, but I think there's general support for it. And I think that we might be seeing that coming from the Senate in this sort of the mini budget. It would be money that came out of, it would come out of the CARES money, the stimulus money, and it would be, you know, sort of a scaled payment for depending on the size of the farm. But I'm also wondering, and I would just put it out to everyone, have you taken advantage of the PPP program, paycheck protection? I think one of you mentioned that, Dave mentioned that. And I'm wondering if you've taken advantage of that. I know that the emergency injury disaster loan program was not available to farmers at the very beginning, but my understanding is that it is. And there's also the pandemic unemployment assistance program, which is, I hear from people all the time, every day, who have not been able to make that work for them. And I'm filling out forms for folks, but just wondering if anybody, and feel free to sort of raise your hand or the little blue hand. Amanda, I see your hand. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. So for our members of Vermont Dairy Producer Alliance, for the most part, the PPP plan was implemented for those that had employees, but farms of different sizes, this does not always apply. Family members might be living directly from the milk check. And so then we advised them to take part in the PUA, which had its own very strong difficulties in the beginning. And I think there's still farms who are struggling to get paid under that program. We offered some cheat notes on how to get on the system and what you need to do. And then we took lists of farmers who got denied and had not heard back from the Department of Labor. And so we did contact the Department of Labor directly, and they were working out the kinks. But honestly, I have not heard back from those farmers that we were on the list, because the PPP did not accommodate those farms who don't have paid employees. They are working and earning money out of their milk check. The EIDL program, you know, what I've heard from that is that there was much confusion around the beginning. I have heard some farms did get the 10,000 advance. Some farms are taking advantage of the $150,000 cap now that they placed on it. But that is another loan that will have to be paid back. And so it's really kind of, I'm not even gonna say 50-50. I think there's probably 30% that are taking part of that. And some of it is just difficulty in the paperwork, and you don't speak to somebody directly in the beginning, you do it online, and there's just some confusion around that. But that's kind of where we ended up with those 3 programs. I did want to address, and then open it up to everybody else, discussion around the proposal with the Senate Ag. For a moment, we did prepare a report, and we had documented that we're going to be about 42 million short in the next 3 months. It's only in the next 3 months, is as far as our projections went, it's about a loss of 14 million a month. And so those were the numbers that got presented in that committee. And we would hope that they would be able to work through the process of how to get that money out to farmers, and soon, because it's needed now, and in 30 days, things could look a lot different. And again, it was a very short-term projection, just related only to COVID-19 losses.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I know that. I think the total of this dairy assistance program is about 8.8 million. So that's not going to meet your needs completely. You know, and it's going to be all part of a conversation that occurs. I've gotten an email or two about the testimony in the Senate Ag Committee yesterday, and I want to stress that when we have these committee meetings and we have discussions, they're really just, we're putting out ideas, we're floating ideas, and nothing that gets said here is necessarily set in stone. So for folks maybe watching in, this is just discussion, and the ultimate product will be when it goes from the Senate to the House and then probably back again, and there might be a committee of conference. I think that they're trying to streamline things, but you know, please don't take everything that's said in these meetings as gospel. So thanks, Amanda. I'm interested, and I'm happy that people are potentially taking advantage of the various programs that are available. Did anybody, Josh, you have your hand up. You want to comment?
Well, I just wanted to kind of comment something about what Amanda just said. Timing is really, I know things can only happen so fast, but timing is really going to be, and then having to pay back, when you have to pay back some of these loans, you just can't get money for free. I mean, we all know there's not a lot free out there, but these are actual losses, right? So they're, and, you know, from the supplier side, and, you know, what we're doing and how we're trying to figure that out is we're talking with our bankers and other things and trying to figure out how we can try to help through this and not get ourselves in a predicament either. So, but timing is going to be somewhat essential about, you know, because, you know, we've kind of made it through now, you know, as you know, milk pays the month before. So we're just coming into now where, you know, this month, you know, May, June, you know, and here, as far as we can see forward, that's really where the money's going to be needed. You know, I'm hoping that, you know, like we all are, that some things turn around quicker than maybe we're projecting at this point. You know, there's a lot of media out there about a lot of different things, and I don't know if I watch a lot of it anymore because I get confused and I can't figure out what's real and what's not. But I do think that the losses are going to be the losses, right? And they're going to be hard to recover from. So anything we can do to mitigate those things, you know what I mean? I think with timing, I just think that everybody's gonna I think that's important. I guess that's all I get to say, that the timing is gonna be
Yeah.
super important.
Yeah, thanks. I see Bill's hand up. Bill?
So yesterday, Senator Starr said that we should see some money in the mailbox in a couple weeks. So I'm going to be checking my mailbox. Hope he's pretty good with a calendar.
I hope that's accurate too, Bill. And I'm not quite sure what the process is going to look like. Sometimes when things are dire or time is short, there are efforts to have everybody on board with a particular issue or bill. And this, I think, might be one of those instances. I know I've been working from my side on some of this. So, you know, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, we discussed this fairly briefly last week. And I think that there was general consensus and thumbs up from all of our committee members that we were, you know, we would be in agreement with this, this dairy assistance program. So hopefully it will move quickly and you will get relief soon. I'm reluctant to make any promises regarding timing or weeks or days, but hopefully it will happen quickly. Any other, oh, Darlene, your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that most people that I know have done the PPP program, myself included, who have employees, and also been working with SBA to try to work through the program. I probably was one of the people that waited until monies were told that they were directly available to farmers, which was just last week, and have an application in, but still, you know, waiting to hear. And then, you know, it scares me as you start hearing rumors that Sunday, and I didn't get my application in until Tuesday. Shame on me, but I still milk and do all the paperwork. I'm sorry. And there's talks about funding already being dried up there, and some bogged down in those application processes from Sunday and Monday and Tuesday morning. So I'm hoping to hear, but I think most farmers that I'm speaking to, and there's a lot of farm groups on Facebook that have been talking about this program. I think everybody's pretty much running to those programs and definitely trying to hook up with those kinds of situations. And I just want to let you know that farmers are educating themselves and getting out there to really get these programs in hand too. Is it the answer to our problem? No, I don't think so. But let's hope that it's a help. And do I think everybody's going to get these programs? I think not. I think, again, monies will be an issue, and also, you know, progress and how things push through, because a lot of this has been done, from what I'm told, computer generated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing I'm concerned about is and someone mentioned it, the forgiveness part of this. And do we know, have we figured out how all of the details around how this PPP program, how you do get for your money forgiven? And I don't know, Dave, yeah, I thought you might be the person to go to on that one, Dave.
Yeah. So I agree. Farmers have turned over every rock. We did a lot of PPP. VAC did a number, community banks and banks around Vermont. Especially if they had employees. There were some farms where they were really looking for self-employment income that had a harder time with the PPP because they had to show a net profit. And when they were doing their taxes, basically what you're doing, you know, maximizing depreciation and reducing your net profit so you have less taxable income worked against you with this particular program. And so on that, for some farms that didn't have employees or were partnerships, LLCs, where they wanted to apply for the self-employed individual, they weren't able to utilize the program to its max. On the forgiveness side, it's going to take really good record keeping. There's no double dipping with EIDL, at least on the grant portion, actually on the loan portion as well. It's going to be a lot of the same documents that we received as lenders to verify the PPP loan amounts. So some of the same payroll information, along with statements for interest paid, statements for rental payments that were made. So there's some guidance. I wish there was more coming from SBA around some of the details, but it will be the local lender that actually, again, verifies the forgiveness amount and then submits that application to SBA. So I think the good news is that the business owners are going to be working again with the same local lenders to help with the forgiveness portion, but it is specific. It's only during those 8 weeks. So I will say that a lot of planning has to take place now, a lot of records and a lot of tracking to make sure you can maximize the forgiveness portion of those loans.
Right, and there's a business in my district, not dairy, not farming, but they did take advantage of the PPP program, and they're concerned because there's a condition that you have to be able to re-employ those people after 8 weeks, put them to work. And the question is it even possible with social distancing and what have you? So I'm, this, as I said, this is a concern to me that people are going to be able to make this work for them.
So that is a concern with because the 8 weeks starts the day your loan was funded. So some of the early PPP loans were still at a time when the businesses couldn't start. Certainly dairies continue to have their employees getting into springtime work. They may even have been ramping up. Again, on the forgiveness side, there's still a lot of questions, such as the timing, rehiring employees who choose not to come back for whatever personal reason they may have. These are still questions that SBA has not provided guidance on.
Yeah, okay.
I would also add that, as Josh said, timing is critical. Both from looking at what prices are now doing and the next 3 months, but also we realize that corn is going in the ground. Hay will be being cut soon. And this is the expenses on a dairy are going to be the highest in the next 3 months, as well as the lowest revenue that we've seen in probably well over a decade.
Yeah. I'm wondering if any committee members have questions for any of our witnesses today. I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, Vicky's waving her hand. Vicky? I'm not seeing any little blue hands. Let's put it that way.
I did raise my hand on there and it must not have worked, Carolyn.
Oh, Linda, you know what? Hold on a sec.
I got it.
Linda, maybe I'm not a co-host.
You are now.
Okay. Oh, now I see the hands. Hey, Vicky.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you. I think Meg left the call, Meg Nelson. I wanted to make a quick comment for Meg on Meg's behalf, and then I have a question for Josh. Meg mentioned their farm and having to even let their helpers go. And her parents are not young. They're probably in their late 50s. Now they're doing all these chores for 185 cows, Plus, they have a cheese business her mom had, and I wanted to ask Meg if that had to kind of be let go. There's only so many hours in a day, and it's really an insult to tell a farmer, well, just work harder. You know, they're already practically killing themselves. But I just wonder, it's a very isolated littler farm, really on a back road that nobody drives by even, and the feeling of isolation's just got to be very wearing. And I wish there was something on a community level we could do to support by tuning. Just something to say, we appreciate you, you know, hang in there. But anyway, I just wanted to mention Meg has been in our committee numerous times. She's had another little baby and they're both helping their parents. I think that's awesome, but what a burden for that, for the farms to be bearing. But my question for Josh, seeing the farmers bearing these burdens, and then I think I heard you say, maybe just clarify that when a farm goes out of business and sometimes they're left leaving you with maybe a large grain bill and are unable to pay that. Did you say that you have $1 million of written off expenses? Could you explain that a little more?
Yep, I can explain that. So obviously, generally try to, like anything in business, you're calculating risk, right? So, you know, I actually do most of the collection work for the company here. With my assistant helps me some with that too. But yeah, it's just been a tougher game. You know, as you have more of this, like I said, in my accounts receivable are up 3 times, which is a really big number. If you look at that from back in 2014-15 to where we are today in 2020, so in 5 or 6 years. So given there's more money there, we're taking more risk. And when we take more risk, you're generally going to take more loss. So I was just in 14, it was, you know, under 200,000, and in 18 and 19, it was, well, in 19, it was just under $1 million. So obviously with a feed business or any other business, these dairies are our life, right? I mean, I farm too. We don't operate. I mean, we have a bag business here. Obviously, we do horse feeds and chicken and swine and other things. That's about 25% of our business, and the other 75% of our business is directly related to dairy. So, you know, we try to hang in there unsecured, and I'm not the only one. The industry does, as long as we can, to try to support our customers and make sure that they're there day in and day out, because I feel it's really important, not only for our company but also for the state and the whole economy. I think the state of Vermont's in deep trouble if we don't keep cow numbers and these dairy businesses in business. So, but as you take more risk, as things get more risky, it just there's no way around it, right? So. It is as it is, and we've tried hard, and you know, there's years that we do better. I'm really concerned if there's no help in a year like this, what can happen? You know, as people, you know, you really can't buy the neighbor's farm. If a guy wants, we didn't talk about that, but if somebody wants to get out of this industry today, how do you get out of this industry? How do you move? If I'm next to Steve, just because I see him on the screen and he wants to buy my farm because I'm looking to get out. I mean, he may want to do that and may want to keep milking those cows and be able to do that. But there's, you know, with the things going on in the co-ops and how that's going, there's a way to, but there's no money there to do that stuff. So it's really put everything at a standstill, I would say, from that standpoint. That's why the financial challenges are just going to be, are just astronomical. I mean, you just heard Amanda say 42 million, you know, and you know, I mean, the amount of dollars that transfer, you know, in agriculture, just in this state is pretty mind-boggling when you really look at it. So, yeah, we've took more risk, and we've I think we've been okay, but I think we've definitely seen an impact from that. So, yeah, unfortunately, you know, when you care about people and dairies and the people you deal with, you know, not every decision's a good one. You know, you try to make the best ones you can. So. Hopefully, I think better days are coming from that standpoint if we can get through this. But I got a feeling this next 12 months might be that could be a scarier number, is my concern, actually sitting here from a supplier standpoint to dairies. Not because the people aren't capable if things stayed where they were, because something like this is just unforeseen and unpredictable, and then people just have no way out today, right? I mean, there's just no way out for them. So thanks for the question.
Thank you, Josh. I have several people who want to ask questions. John O'Brien is first, then Rodney, and then Tom. And I'm going to go stoke my stove because I'm freezing to death here, but I am listening. Go ahead, John.
While we have a lot of the stars of the Vermont dairy industry on here today, I just had a couple observations and a question. The first was that anybody left in dairy farming at this point in Vermont or around the country, I've never seen such a tough, smart, and super efficient industry. The next observation is that how, when someone like Agrimark says, well, there are going to be better prices next summer, every smart, efficient dairy farmer seems to be, and this was echoed today by Steve and Darlene and Amanda, tease up to produce more milk. And so I'm not much of an economist, but I can just see, even without COVID, that this is just going to create, more of an oversupply problem. Even if you have a window of good pricing, ultimately, everybody, if you multiply what's just happening in our little Zoom room of farmers here, if you multiply that by every farmer in the country, it's going to go back to an oversupply. So just how as an industry do we control this? It seems like it'd make more sense for the government to pay farmers not to make milk, or if you could reach a point where you have half the cows and you get twice the price for milk, that would be a better situation than we're in. And this isn't even dealing with COVID. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Does somebody want to take that? I see Steve's hand is up. Steve, and then Amanda.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And, I am convinced that there's a lot of things, like I think back to September 11th, and I think a lot of the changes that we've seen in our country that have been good for our country as a result of that. And I think the same thing will happen as a result of what we're going through right now. We've dealt with an oversupply issue in the country for a long, long time. And now the individual co-ops, the farmers wanted the government to kind of solve the problem for them, government to step in. And that's been going on as long as one can remember. Now the individual co-ops are kind of taking the lead on that. And I envision that that's probably going to be the way things are going forward. Agrimark, that I'm a member of, we spent all last year kind of establishing what was going to be our base going forward. So we were already kind of headed down that road, because the co-op's mindset is we got to make sure we keep our supply in balance so we can protect the interests of our farmers and our members. And I don't want to say with confidence, but I think that that's one of the things that will probably come out of this, is that you'll see a lot, more continuation of that on the co-op level, and less reliance on the federal government to, mandate supply, because they don't want anything to do with it.
Amanda, thanks, Steve. Amanda?
I agree with Steve. And I mean, certainly members of this call, Darlene, Bill, and I, and Dave, I think, was very aware of the discussion back in the day, and Josh, but we worked really hard around the country with DFWT on this very issue, and implemented some market stabilization plans and vetted them through Bob Wellington, who has my utmost respect, and we certainly miss him during this time. We worked with other economists around the country as well. We were one vote away, and only because of politics did it not get its shake in the Congress. But here we are, and co-ops are now feeling the pain enough that they are actually implementing these programs that they said they couldn't do. So I agree with Steve that down the road, these are tools that could be very useful. But right now during COVID, it's just a double whammy because it wasn't unveiled and unrolled in a way that we could also match our expenses. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think long term, I do agree. Now we will see a tool that they can't say can't be done. But I want to just make sure everybody is very aware. 1 in 5 children in the country go to bed hungry. So when we talk about oversupply, I'm not sure there's an oversupply of food. We need food. We need food to keep our country safe and strong. And if we can provide food to other countries, to me, that is the best weapon against any kind of war because we're providing safe food. When people go hungry and are starving, they will stop at nothing. So for me, it's really a processing, infrastructure, price chain kind of an issue. And if we were doing a better job getting this product where it needs to be at a fair enough price, we'd all be better off. But those are conversations that we have to keep having in the next several months. Tomorrow, we will be on a conference call with Congressman Welch to talk about these very issues. But right now with COVID, we're dealing with this first time change with our co-op reducing production at a time when we weren't able to get our costs down to a certain level because we knew this was coming and we had invested so much in our infrastructure. And I'll cede it to Bill here to finish up on this topic.
Okay, Bill's hand up, and Dave, was your hand up? Okay, but we'll go to Bill and then we'll go to you, Dave.
Well, Mr. O'Brien's question, that was a good question. And I think you're right on the target there. That back in 2006 was the difficult thing to go to another region of the country and try to convince those farmers that don't produce twice as much milk for half price, produce half as much for full price. I mean, you don't have to be much of a businessman to figure that out. But if you talk to any farmer, they'll lose 10 or 15% of their production in a heat wave, but they can't manage to cut back 2% to protect their price or to reduce the oversupply. And we went through that and went through it. We went to Congress. I don't know how many committees we sat before in Congress. And finally, it got to the point where that we had a national coalition of farmers and not just farmers, also vendors that had joined with us. We got to the point where we had 66 votes in the Senate and they whipped the votes and we had the votes in the House. But then Speaker of the House, Boehner, wouldn't schedule the bill for a vote because he knew we would prevail. And it appears that PAC money was an issue. So, people look at the farmer and say, why do you guys do that? That producing milk is the only response we can do. Either produce milk or go out of business. And none of us want to go out of business. So we had to convince National Milk to get on board. Somebody had to talk their co-op into backing us, because the congressional delegates, every time you'd go to Washington, the first thing they'd ask you, is your co-op behind you with this idea of a management tool? How about National Milk? Are they behind you? We finally got the co-ops and National Milk on board. And we thought we were getting somewhere. But then it became obvious that it was too much of a political hot potato. How do you do it? The co-ops themselves have the authority to manage their own supply. So manage your own supply. Why do you think that it's fair to ask the farmer to dump milk at their expense so that you can keep your plant wet? That's our plant. It's not your plant, it's our plant, the members. And I was at a DFA meeting last fall in Syracuse, and we were told there weren't enough votes in the Northeast to have a management tool at play. And I said, you said that in front of the wrong guy, because I'm not buying what you're saying. So I think what you meant to say was there weren't enough votes on the board to pass that. But there's certainly enough votes amongst the farmers, because the farmers can't keep dumping milk at their expense so that you guys can travel around the country and go to the meetings. Well, wasn't maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, it was announced that there would be a management tool in the Northeast Council for DFA. Then we heard that Agrimark was going to impose a management tool. So we're finally getting somewhere. Everybody says, you guys need to diversify and do something different. We're finally going to do something different. It's not going to be convenient. We're in this crisis, and that's going to suck the lifeblood out of us. But we're doing something different. And when we get to the other side, like it's been said earlier, a lot of things are going to change. Protocol for a lot of things will change. A lot of things won't be here anymore. But there'll still be farmers in Vermont that want to farm. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Bill. Dave, and then we have hands up. Rodney is next, then Tom. Terry, your hand was up, but now I see it's down. And Sharon has her hand up. So Dave, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, just lending my voice. I totally agree. The dairy industry has never been together as it is today. As you've heard, there's dairy farmers, there's co-ops, there's processors, and they're closer and working better than they ever have in the past. They're really making the most out of this crisis, and I believe they will. I mean, you've seen on the processor side with the Dean Food collapse and other processors having difficulty, that all of the pieces have to work, and I believe that they are, and that maybe one thing that comes out of this crisis, I think Josh mentioned it, is that they'll be able to do that going forward.
Thanks, Dave. Rodney.
Yeah, well, I agree with what everybody's saying, and I sold my cows here recently. I made the decision back in January that I was going to, because of the milk price and situation in Organic Valley. But I think it was a couple of weeks ago that I made mention to the committee that I was very disappointed that the government and the state was doing a lot for all other sorts of industries, but was not doing anything for dairy. And I think that we're finally the Senate's going to come up with something to help out, but I don't, the amount of money that's available from the federal government to go to agriculture is just not going to be enough to bail everybody out. And it's going to be a one-shot deal. It will be helpful, but everything would be helpful, but it's not really, the government really hasn't put enough into this CARES Act or any other act that's going to be, get us back on even keel. And it's very disappointing in my view that, agriculture is the foundation of this country, and we're at the bottom of the totem pole when help needs to be gotten. I just don't understand why we're doing that. I mean, we got people getting more unemployment than they were getting when they were working. And now they don't want to go back to work because they're getting more money on unemployment. That's just stupid. And I don't know how to change it.
Thanks, Rodney. I know it's very frustrating. And the way things are working, there are folks, And it just makes sense money-wise. If you're getting an extra $600 on top of what you would typically get, and you can't go back, I've heard from the woman who cuts my hair, and if she can't have the regular system that she has, where she has 3 customers per hour, she's working on 3 people in every hour, she's not gonna be able to make it. So there are some things that are just, they don't make sense. But hopefully this will be the immediate help that we can bring. But I think that the Senate and Bobby in particular are working on other longer term, potentially helpful provisions, and they're working on it, and we can chime in as the time time grows nearer, as they're working out the details. So I have Tom Bach, and then Sharon, and then Vicky has her hand up. Tom?
Yes, I have a question for Bill Roll. This is regarding the 4 big export markets: China, Japan, Mexico, and Korea. Bill, do you know, have they just stopped buying? Or have they found other sources? What happened to that market?
Well, part of it has to do with the labor that it takes to send the product there and for them to receive the product. They're all in crisis as well as us. So that was one of the issues. The other issue is the currency. Our dollar is quite strong right now. In fact, it's worth more than $1. And if you compare it to those currencies, there's something of a fraction of our dollar. And so I think that slowed things up. The markets will start to move, but they need a push. And that's why I thought that, if we have all of this big money that we're writing checks for in the federal government, and it's not getting all of it where it's intended, why couldn't they do something with a voucher system to do something, term it however, or disguise it however you need to get it past the World Trade Organization, and put some money into that to make our markets move, so that we can pay our vendors, so that people can eat, and so that we can maybe even enjoy a little loyalty in the future from those markets. People don't forget those things. So, but no, it's sluggish, and there's no indication that it's going to move real quick. I know 3 weeks ago, cheddar cheese was $1.05 a pound. If you figure that out, that's $10.50 milk. Last week it was $1.20. This week it's $1.30. So the price of cheddar is coming up, and it'll slowly get there, but it's slow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
I think what farmers have on their side is that most everybody eats. And I think I've said this any number of times. I think people are going to appreciate farmers more and more as things get tougher and tougher. So that's what farmers have going for them.
Well, Carolyn, let me respond to that. I'll give you an example. My grandson lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and his father's got a big job down there. So he had a birthday party, and his folks said, "Xavier, why don't you invite some of your friends from school?" And they had they rent a place on Saturday, and all the kids show up, and they have a menu, and they stay there for however many hours. One little boy came up and said, Xavier had invited him to his birthday party. He said, "Well, could I invite my brothers too? We don't have very much to eat at the house." He said, "I can't come unless they could come."
Yep.
Just think
Yeah.
of that. That's
Yeah,
not
I mean-
supposed to happen.
Yeah, no, that's heartbreaking.
You bet.
And
it
I
is.
think as Amanda said, you know, a certain number of kids in this country are going hungry.
Yeah. So I think the farmer's doing their job. So what I'm trying to figure out is who is it that's reluctant to stick their neck out and do their job, 100% of their job, not just the part that works for them. There's somebody that's laying back on us.
Mhm.
And if I can find him, he'll wake up.
Well, I think that there are some folks who don't understand actually where their food comes from. Sharon, you have your hand up and Vicky still has hers up. Vicky, Sharon, you go ahead and then Vicky.
Thank you. Bill had mentioned earlier that, you know, we have this commitment to inexpensive food. And I'm thinking about the measures that our co-ops up here have been taking to reduce production. I'm wondering, are the co-ops out west where they have the giant facilities, are they also cutting production? Are they requiring that their members reduce their milk production?
Yes, that is a fact.
Is it 15%?
There are the DFA, of course, is the largest co-op in the country, right? And they have, I think it's 7, they call them councils. So that we're in the Northeast Council. Then there's the Southwest Council,
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera. I think there's only one council left that doesn't have a management tool at play. So,
Okay.
so they're paying attention and they're watching it pretty close. My question was, what happens if there's a demand here in the Northeast Council and we're under a management tool and we can't respond to the demand? What are you going to do? Funnel milk in from somewhere else? And that's not what I want to see happen. And they said we might have to temporarily, but that's not our intention to do that way.
Is there anything in place so that, heaven forbid, on top of a pandemic that impacts humans, and I understand tigers in zoos, if something were to happen that, I'm assuming that these volume restrictions are going to be kept in place for quite some time, that the lack of predictability with what's going to happen based on the COVID-19 pandemic. I think I'm grateful, really relieved to hear that 6 of the 7 regional councils have something in place. But I'm also thinking, you know, what you just said, Bill, you know, if something happened and there was an outbreak of some kind of disease in the dairy industry, I would want to make sure that volume could be lifted for or put at a regional level. So if some herds are out of business, others could pick up that slack. And I like your idea about providing some kind of support so that we can get some of the surplus that we currently have to Mexico. Mexico's pretty far away from Vermont, but the fact that 1 in 5 kids is hungry also makes me think that something within the United States, most food shelves do not distribute milk because of its short shelf life and its need for refrigeration. And I'm wondering if there's also a solution that focuses more on our kids, like Mandy St. Pierre said, that she was hearing from families that haven't been getting milk because they haven't been able to do the kind of grocery shopping they need to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
the SNAP program, you know, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program would be a place that they could go knock on the door and say, listen, we're not eating, we need some help. These kids need milk, you know. That if that was my situation, I'd certainly be there doing that. I'd be I wouldn't be too bashful, I don't think, if it came to the kids.
Yep. Take the Mountain Dew off of the acceptable item list on SNAP and make sure that there's plenty of milk.
So listen, to explain that in better detail, those co-ops, DFA said, listen, the hardest time to market milk is from March through August. And in the springtime, they have what they call the spring flush. So there's an abundance of milk. So they said, we want to put a management tool at play from March through August, and we're going to watch it very closely. And as we approached that, then this COVID thing came about, and we are where we are now. But they do have a plan, and they claim they're going to watch it very closely. So we're going to have to do what we can to hold them to it. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
I saw Darlene wave her hand, and so I thought I'd give her an opportunity to respond. And then Vicky's hand is still up, and we'll go to Vicky. Darlene?
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that I am a part of the Vermont Milk Promotion Board, that they meet once a year, usually down in Berlin. And because of COVID-19, there was a lot of funding that was kind of hanging out there that needed to be spent. And one thing that did happen is that there was 92 schools that are receiving coolers for milk, so that kids can continue to receive milk through the program, through the rest of the school year, and as well as into the summer, which I was really happy that you know, they decided to use those funds to help out kids in need. And then the second thing I wanted to kind of backtrack on when it comes to the cooperative is yes, the 7 area councils are out there, and yes, 6 of them have some form of management right now going on. But at the same time, if we're going to make this a longer plan that's going to stay into effect for a long period of time, I'm hoping that at least in our area, we would kind of backtrack a little bit, because this was put into place very quick, like 1 month's worth of milk. That was your production. That's your limitation, 15% cut, and then it was a done deal. So I'm hoping just because of the fact that it was such a quick thing, that they would actually think about that before moving forward and making this a long-term situation. I personally don't mind that whatsoever. I just hope that everybody's going to put a little bit more thought process in it before we jump into the boat and say this is the end of what we're going to do.
Yeah, thanks, Darlene. Vicky. Thanks for your patience, Vicky. You've been good.
No worries. Actually, Sharon kind of brought out what I was thinking of asking, but I'll just elaborate a bit more and wondering if Mr. Rowell will indulge me with an answer. But you talked about the government cheap food policy. And the other day I was at the store and bought 2 mangoes for $1 and thought I really struck it rich. And I'm just like, is it just an American mentality that we love to see a good sale? And particularly in food, you know, like, hey, strawberries are $1.50 at the farmer's sometimes expense. I can't imagine growing it and making any money in that way. But just on that note, and you could elaborate on that a little bit. What's the deal with the cheaper food mentality? But also, is there something we can do as a committee? You mentioned talking to our congressional delegation. And Michael Grady is great at crafting letters for us that we haven't had to send in a while. But is there something that we can do to show support for all of you? So just go ahead and let me know, Bill.
Well, I don't know what support that you can offer beyond what you folks are doing in conjunction with what the Senate Ag Committee is doing to present to the administration. I think you don't go to the governor with that. I think Sununu can make that decision, but I think Vermont elected to go to the General Assembly for that decision. Is that correct? Do you know? To disperse money to somebody, don't you have to go to the General Assembly, to the legislative body to make that decision? Does anyone know that?
Huh. Mike?
So the Constitution provides that the General Assembly is the one that appropriates the funding, but there is a authority through the Joint Fiscal Committee to authorize, and under statute to authorize the administration to use up to a certain percentage of funds without direct General Assembly approval. That's already been done, but as Bill referenced, the bulk of it will need to be appropriated by the General Assembly for use. It'll go out probably in 3 stages. First in the supplemental appropriation bill, that's gonna probably move in the next week or so. Then in a mid-tier, and then in an appropriation bill probably in August and September, when all of the revenue impact is known. So if there is a dairy assistance bill, just because one passes doesn't mean that another can't pass. So there's opportunity that will be available beyond this first stimulus bill that's passed out in the next week or 2.
Good. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I was having trouble with my little mute clicker. Anyway.
So Vicky, cheap food shows up. I think that's a result of maybe a surplus in the berry crop, or maybe something to do with competition. But if you were watching television news maybe 3 weeks ago or so, when you saw all of those beautiful tomatoes and squash plowed into the ground down in Florida, you know, that leaves a hole in the supply chain, and that was destined for maybe your table. And now you're not going to have an opportunity there until somebody else grows tomatoes and squash. So that was a poor deal. I don't see how that could happen in this country, but it happened, and the guy took a direct loss on that. He got nothing out of it at all.
Yeah. And and one of the reasons was they didn't have the people to pick it.
Right. Yeah.
So, and Sharon remarked in a chat here, and I was going to say that I think the US pays probably one of the lowest percentages of our income for food than any other country. I think people in Europe pay way more for their food as a percentage of their income.
I think we pay 8 or 9%, don't we?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Amanda has her hand up, and I know Terry does, but Amanda, I'm thinking this is a response to what we've been talking about, and then we'll go to Terry.
Yes. You know, my father, who's passed away now, he grew up in the Great Depression. He served in World War II. And his last years of life, he was very discouraged with the rate of our farming and ag going out in this country, because his worry was being hungry. And he remembered being hungry, and he remembered the people from the city coming to their little farm in Franklin. And that little farm in Franklin fed not just their family, but many families. And he always said that, you know, the prices will not increase on food until Americans go hungry again. And that's kind of a dire prediction for me, certainly in the last several months, as we're seeing this unfold. I mean, I never thought that we would be where we're at, where, you know, farmers are not going to make it, but there's an abundance of food, but the food's not getting to those that are hungry. It's just a strange dichotomy for me. I just don't really understand it. And I think part of the other reason is after the Great Depression, farmers were incentivized to industrialize so that America would never go hungry again. And we did such a great job in being efficient and learning how to produce more with less. And we're still learning that, you know, we're kind of our own problem, because we're doing what the country asked us. But now we're in a situation where, you know, other people have controlled where the food goes and how it gets there. And we're working off a really old federal order system that was meant for a different time period. And I don't know if that answers the question of why of our cheap foods and why do Americans enjoy cheap food. It's because for years and years and years, we've just been producing it. And I think that is probably going to be one of the outcomes in COVID-19, that Americans are going to have to get used to a different percentage of their expense being to food. But again, we also need to fix that money goes back to the farmer, because I don't think it's right that families can't afford a gallon of milk. So it's going to have to be looked in the mid and long term planning.
Right, and we're thankful to the food bank. They did, I think, and the Vermont Community Fund invested about $60,000, and they've produced over 11,000 gallons of milk and 42,000 cups of yogurt that have gone to the food bank, and we're really thankful for the work they're doing. Terry, you want to comment? And then we're probably going to have to wrap this up, and I don't want to forget to get the Farm First number out. So I'm going to say it right now. It's 1-877-493-6216. If you're having problems, you know a farmer that's having problems, please don't hesitate to call 877-493-6216. And that is a number that's available 24/7. So Terry, why don't you ask your
Sure.
question?
Well, it's not really a question, but it's just sort of along the same line as what Amanda and Bill talked about. That, I mean, I milked cows for 40 years and I saw ups and downs constantly. And it finally dawned on me that, like, when they started the federal order in what, 48, 49, somewhere around there, the whole purpose was to make a level playing field for farmers so they weren't getting this ups and down. And it worked for a while. And I think eventually the government kind of decided, well, hey, let's use that to keep the price of the product down. And they weren't really worried so much about, the farmers. And I think that happened in the early 70s. And because, we are Americans and we love cheap food, and we were bountiful in our, supply. And now I think it's time that the federal order was revamped somehow or even eliminated. I mean, basically, the only person I ever knew in my whole life that could explain how they came up with the federal order was, the name escapes me, the one from Agmark. Can't think of his name right now, but he's passed away now, Bob Wellington. Okay. And he seemed to know how they actually came up with it, but he was the only one. It's very complicated and makes no sense whatsoever, but we're stuck with it. So I think, maybe it's time we got rid of it. Just my thoughts.
I think it's past time we got rid of it myself. I think farmers should be paid what it costs to at least what it costs to produce the milk, plus some kind of fair premium to give them a decent income and pay them a living wage. I think it's absurd the way this works. So I think, let's see, what time is it? Oh, it's 11:30. So we're going to have to wrap this up. I want to thank all of you for your input and spending time with us out of your busy schedules. And we so appreciate it. Hopefully we'll be able to develop some things that'll help out, including this dairy assistance program, which is coming along, and then take things to another level in terms of maybe a medium term solution. But I really think that a long-term solution is necessary, and I appreciate the work that all of you did, you farmers did, in terms of a supply management program. And I'm really disappointed that it failed. I think that would have made a huge difference for everyone. So thanks for your work on that. I know you traveled the entire country trying to make that happen. So our thanks go out to you for your efforts, and maybe the rest of the country will begin to see the light in terms of making something happen this time around. So thanks, everybody. And
Thank you.
yep, so I think we're going to probably stop our live streaming now, and we'll see you all on Friday. The House Agriculture and Forestry Committee will start at 8:30 on Friday if you want to join us.
Okay.
Thanks.